Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In today's update, we are taking a closer look at an important development tied to Iraq's long-awaited oil and gas law, a piece of legislation that has been discussed for years and is rooted in the country's 2005 constitution. According to the latest information, this law is once again expected to appear on the parliamentary agenda in upcoming sessions, and notably, there are indications that the Kurdistan region is already operating in a way that aligns with many of its principles. While this may sound like a routine political update on the surface, it actually carries deeper implications for Iraq's economic stability, federal unity, and ultimately, the long-term outlook for the Iraqi dinar. To understand why this matters, it's important to briefly revisit the background. Iraq's 2005 constitution laid out a framework for how oil and gas resources should be managed and shared between the federal government and regional authorities, particularly the Kurdistan regional government. However, despite the constitutional requirement, a comprehensive oil and gas law has never been fully passed and implemented. This has led to years of disputes over revenue sharing, export authority, and contractual agreements with international oil companies. Now, what makes this current update significant is the suggestion that Kurdistan is already functioning in a manner consistent with what the law would require. In practical terms, this implies that some of the most contentious issues, such as coordination with Baghdad on oil exports and revenue mechanisms, may already be moving toward alignment, even without the formal legal framework being in place. From a financial and economic perspective, this is a potentially positive signal. One of the key challenges Iraq has faced over the years is policy inconsistency and fragmentation in its energy sector. Oil revenues account for the vast majority of government income, and any lack of coordination between federal and regional authorities introduces uncertainty into the system. That uncertainty can affect everything from budget planning to foreign investment decisions. If Kurdistan is indeed aligning its practices with federal expectations, and if the oil and gas law is formally introduced and passed in upcoming parliamentary sessions, it could represent a meaningful step toward greater economic cohesion. This, in turn, could improve investor confidence, particularly among international energy companies that have long sought clarity and stability in Iraq's legal and regulatory environment. For followers of the Iraqi dinar, the connection here lies in the broader economic foundation that supports a currency. Exchange rate stability and long-term currency strength are not driven by isolated policy announcements, but by consistent economic governance, predictable revenue streams, and institutional credibility. A unified and transparent oil revenue system would strengthen Iraq's fiscal position, making it easier for the government to manage its budget, reduce deficits, and potentially build reserves. In the short term, however, it is important to remain realistic about the immediate impact. The mere discussion or scheduling of the oil and gas law does not automatically translate into rapid economic transformation or sudden changes in currency valuation. Legislative processes in Iraq can be complex, and even when laws are passed, implementation can take time. Political negotiations, regional interests, and administrative challenges all play a role in how quickly such a law can move from paper to practice. That said, the fact that this law is being revisited and potentially placed on the legislative docket is itself noteworthy. It suggests that policymakers are aware of the need to resolve long-standing structural issues within the energy sector. It also indicates a possible shift toward consensus building, especially if both Baghdad and Erbil are moving closer in their approaches. Looking at the medium-term implications, the formalization of the oil and gas law could help reduce disputes between the federal government and the Kurdistan region. Historically, disagreements over oil exports and revenue sharing have led to budgetary disruptions, delayed payments, and even temporary halts in production or exports. These disruptions not only affect government finances, but also send mixed signals to international markets. A clear legal framework would provide defined roles and responsibilities, reducing the likelihood of such conflicts. This stability could encourage more consistent oil production and export levels, which are crucial for maintaining steady revenue flows. In turn, this could support government spending on infrastructure, public services, and economic diversification efforts. For the Iraqi dinar specifically, these developments contribute to the overall macroeconomic environment rather than directly triggering exchange rate changes. A stronger, more predictable fiscal system can support currency stability over time, but it does not guarantee appreciation or revaluation. Currency movements depend on a wide range of factors, including monetary policy, inflation, foreign reserves, and global economic conditions. In the long term, the successful implementation of the oil and gas law could play a role in strengthening Iraq's economic institutions. By establishing a transparent and consistent system for managing its most important resource, Iraq would be taking a step toward greater economic maturity. This could improve its standing with international financial institutions, enhance its credit profile, and potentially attract broader foreign investment beyond the energy sector. Another aspect to consider is the signaling effect. When a country resolves major internal policy disputes and demonstrates the ability to implement long-delayed legislation, it sends a message of progress and stability. For investors and analysts, this can be just as important as the specific details of the law itself. It reflects a willingness to address structural challenges and move toward a more coordinated economic strategy. However, it is equally important to approach this development with a balanced perspective. While the alignment of Kurdistan with the anticipated framework is encouraging, the true test will be in the formal passage of the law and its consistent enforcement. Past experience has shown that agreements in principle do not always translate into smooth implementation on the ground. There are also external factors to keep in mind. Global oil prices, regional geopolitical dynamics, and shifts in energy demand all influence Iraq's economic outlook. Even with a strong legal framework in place, these external variables can impact revenue levels and fiscal stability. Therefore, while the oil and gas law is a critical piece of the puzzle, it is not the only factor determining Iraq's economic trajectory. For those closely following Iraqi dinar developments, the key takeaway is that this update represents a structural and foundational issue rather than a short-term catalyst. It is part of a broader process of economic reform and institutional strengthening. Progress in this area should be viewed as a positive step toward long-term stability, but not as an immediate trigger for dramatic changes in currency value. It is also worth noting that responsible analysis requires separating verified developments from speculation. The information currently available indicates that the law is expected to be on the agenda for upcoming parliamentary sessions and that there is some level of alignment already in practice. Beyond that, details about timing, final provisions, and implementation mechanisms remain subject to the legislative process. As always, it is important for viewers to stay informed through credible sources and to avoid making decisions based solely on expectations or rumors. The Iraqi economy is evolving, and while there are signs of progress, it is a gradual process that requires careful observation and analysis. In summary, the re-emergence of the oil and gas law on the legislative agenda, combined with indications of alignment from the Kurdistan region, is a noteworthy development in Iraq's economic landscape. It points toward potential improvements in coordination, revenue management, and institutional stability. These are all positive factors for the country's long-term economic health and, by extension, for the environment in which the Iraqi dinar operates. However, the impact of this development should be understood within a broader context. It is a step forward, not a final destination. The real significance will depend on how the law is finalized, implemented, and sustained over time. If you found this analysis helpful and want to continue receiving responsible, fact-based updates on the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's economy, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And as always, please remember that this content is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.